Welcome back to What You Will Learn. My name is Adam Ashton.
And my name is Adam Jones. Today we are reviewing our 200 episodes.
Woo! Fuck yeah.
You get that? You normally say...
Sorry, mate. I was very slow there. Yeah. Our 200th episode, it certainly is. So we started about 3 years ago. In fact, almost exactly 3 years ago. And since then, we've done 199 episodes, today being episode 200.
So yeah, it's come quite a long way. Like at the very start, I think one weekend I just said to you, let's just do a podcast. And you said, yeah. And you rolled with it. And then a week later, you asked me, are we recording this weekend? I'm like, shit, he actually wants to do a podcast.
Mate, it was one of those things where we, I guess it was just a test at first. We wanted to try it out. We both love listening to podcasts. We both thought that podcasters were pretty cool and we wanted to be like them. And we just went for it, hit record. And admittedly, it was pretty weak at the start. But we sort of did it as like a 10-episode test because we thought, the worst case is we'll read 10 books, we'll retain more than we normally would, we'll learn this new skill of podcasting, we'll probably improve our communication skills, both speaking and listening, we'll improve our confidence a bit, and then maybe number 6 or 7 on the list is maybe someone might listen.
Yeah, that idea of like we just kept on tinkering from the very start, and then over time, I think it got better.
Yeah.
Some people might prefer the early episodes when it was really just red raw and us singing and rapping along to making up bullshit songs. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we've definitely, it's certainly come a long way. The first episode and probably the first 20 were like, we literally just hit record, talked a lot of shit and then hit stop with not much more thought or planning beyond that. And so we've got a lot more serious about it, putting in a lot more time and effort and thinking into it. But it was interesting to go back and listen to some of those old eps and listen to some of those songs especially.
What's the best thing that you've gotten away from this that you've taken into?
Mate, question without notice is that wasn't on the run sheet.
I told you.
Yeah. I think the best thing for me is probably just that it's just become a big project in that it started with very low effort, low risk, low sort of time involvement, and then gradually it's ratcheted up over time. And I think that's probably the way to approach most projects from now on, in that if at the very start you said, you're going to read, to make a podcast, you have to read 8 to 10 hours a week. You have to spend 2 to 3 hours making notes and then an hour editing notes and then half an hour discussing and then 2 hours editing and 2 hours recording. I'd probably say, no, get stuffed. But because we started with like, let's just hit record and built up from there. We probably didn't even notice how much extra work we were doing. So it was I think for me, that's just the meta approach of how to approach a new project. What about you?
I like that. Yeah, I should have thought of if I'm asking the question. For me, I think it's been huge, just the amount of stuff I've learnt. Like it's hard to really consciously understand how different you are from where you are now to where you started before these 200 books. Like how did I look at the world? It was completely different. I look at the world completely different now. I've got a much better understanding of a lot of situations and social situations, and I'm not as uncomfortable around, big dogs doing big talk because you can just see through some of their shit sometimes, which is a really big deal. So it's just a lot of it's about learning, and then also in terms of self-esteem, that a project actually took off a little bit and got a bit of traction, because at the very start it was just a graveyard of me just trying to do shit on weekends, and everyone thought, Jonesy's a weirdo, he's just doing weird shit, and nothing really worked out early days.
Yeah, I like it very much so. So this episode, what we're going to do is we've gone back and listened to all of our past interviews that we've done with some of the big dog international best-selling authors that we've been lucky enough to speak to, and we've got a bit of a recap of sort of the best 20 or so 1 to 2 minute snippets of what they said. But before we get stuck in, we want to get a bit of feedback from you guys. Having done 200 episodes now, we've put a quick survey together to get some feedback both on the past of what we've done well or not so well, but also looking to the future, like what sort of books you're looking to hear next, and if any of the guests we spoke to you'd like to hear again for round 2.
Or if there's any parts of our style, we still think it's pretty early days for us, so we're happy to tinker and change stuff around if it's going to improve the show in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. So you can do that at whatyouvilllearn.com/survey. we're only going to put a couple of questions in there, but it'd be very, very valuable for us to get that feedback at this sort of inflection point of 200 episodes. We've done a lot, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. So we'd love to hear from you guys. Let's get stuck into it, mate. The first snippet that we're going to play is from our very first ever interview with a big man named Matthew Michalewicz. And it was our very first interview. It actually took us 7 months to get the first interview. So the first 7 months was just us two doing our own eps, getting a lot of rejections, getting a lot of no's, sending a lot of really shitty, arrogant emails that are pretty painful to go back and read. But we eventually got the first one,
Absolutely.
which was Big Matthew.
We must give a shout out to our man Daniel from Kenya. So at the very start, he was our virtual assistant. I think we read the 4-hour work week early and we're just obsessed about assistants. So he was the one who went through our whole Goodreads list and saw our top 100 books and then sent out 100 emails. And then of all of them, thanks to Michael. Yeah, Matthew.
No, that's going to come into play very soon, actually. Yeah. But mate, we nearly got Tim Ferriss in the early days, and like his assistant responded to us, but I'm very glad that we didn't, because that would have been a stinker. That would have been painful.
Even this will be painful to listen to, but let's roll it.
This is our very first ever interview question that we ever asked.
Matthew, good morning. It's Adam and Adam.
How you going, mate?
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good, thank you. We realise your son is also Adam.
That's right. Absolutely. So it's a name I'm very fond of.
We'll take that.
Mate, we have to ask you, how do you pronounce your surname? We've heard you a few times on YouTube, and we've heard Michalewicz, Michael.
Yeah, Michalewicz, like the name Michael, and then witch, like witch on a broomstick.
Michalewicz. There's a lot of people seem to get that wrong, that's for sure.
Yeah, and what they end up doing is they focus on the last name and then end up calling me Michael. So that's usually what happens.
Yep. Fuck that one up. Sorry,
even
Matthew.
Again now. Mate, we spent way too long talking about that.
Mate, no one really cares about us asking what his surname is. So the first
that was a shit question.
A very weak start.
But thankfully, though, we picked up from there. We were able to get some great juice out of Matthew Michalewicz, who wrote the book that we did, Life in Half a Second.
Yeah, this is a really good book, actually. A very short book for a very relatively unknown author. That's how we got him on for the first one, if I was brutally honest. But he speaks about the dream box, which is a really cool metaphor for, I think that a lot of people, as they grow older, they start closing in on their dream box, and it's something that you have as someone very young. It's very easy to look in, but as Michael, as Matthew's about to tell us, it gets harder and harder to look in there as the responsibilities of life kind of stack up as we get older and older.
The feeling that I get from these people is that once they enter the corporate world, they saddle themselves with obligations. There's the mortgage on the house, there's the loan on the car, then there's marriage, there's a child, there's tuitions at schools and so forth. And the corporate lifestyle provides that certainty, or at least that illusion of certainty, that you're going to have that paycheck and you can pay your bills and so forth. And then it becomes very, very difficult to kind of break that paradigm and say, okay, now I'm going to follow my passion. Because to follow your passion, you might have to get rid of the job, which provides the income, which pays for all of the obligations that you've developed. And that becomes kind of the trap that, and the obligations grow in time. Kids get older, there's more kids, there's greater tuitions, there's, a bigger house, a bigger car, and so forth. So I feel like people just fall into this trap where it becomes very difficult and very risky for them to go and step out and pursue something. Whereas when I was 18, I didn't have any of those obligations. I lived with my parents, I didn't have a house, I wasn't married, I didn't have kids. So it was really easy and much less risk involved in becoming an entrepreneur and in doing something you're passionate about.
Yeah, so I think he's spot on in that, when we're young, eyes are open, we're dreamers, our dream box is wide open and it's full of dreams. And then as we gradually add more and more obligations into the mix, the lid starts to close and close and close, and eventually we might close that lid completely and it gets too painful to open it up. So that was our very first interview. which was all about entrepreneurship and business and speaking to this millionaire businessman. And our second interview was a complete 180. We spoke to Timber Hawkeye, a Buddhist monk who lives in a caravan basically and lives off about $5 a day by the sounds of it. And the big thing that he talked about here was one of the main tenets of Buddhism, I guess, is that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. In that it's all a matter of perspective. It's not so much what happens to us, but how we react. We've got no control over the outside world. We've got no control of the objective experience that happens outside of us. The only thing that we can control is our subjective interpretations and how we react. So, the pain is always going to be there no matter what, but it's up to us to decide if we suffer or if we don't.
One of the parts I really liked, I guess, something along the lines of pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Yes, that's, if you were to encapsulate all of the Buddhist teachings into one sentence, that is it. That pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Yeah, sorry. Can you tell us a little bit more?
So how do you choose not to suffer?
Well, you realize that the suffering is a choice. So that's the first thing. Like if you're stuck in traffic, for example, or if you're going through a hard time. I think a really good example of this is when a man said, I was sad because I didn't have shoes, but then I met a man who didn't have feet. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden that you realize that we create so much of our own suffering in our mind because we create a story and we label our situation and we say, this is bad, this is horrible, this is wrong, I'm stuck in traffic. And it's like, you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic, you're part of the problem. Saying that you're stuck in traffic, it implies that everybody else is in your way and you're creating your own suffering by thinking that you are somehow superior to others and that this shouldn't happen. But when you step outside of that, then the discomfort of going 2 miles an hour is unfortunate. But you'd be like, I'm just going to pop in an audiobook and I'm going to enjoy this time. Yeah. Or I'm going to sit here and get angry and yell and honk my horn and give the finger to everyone who drives by. It's like, so it's about perspective. So I think pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. It makes you realize the pain is there. Yeah. But whether we identify with it and create a story around it, and that's totally optional.
Yeah, it's still pretty awkward there. And you really liked a few of his gags there, did you, actually?
I thought they were pretty good gags. But, mate, some of those questions we asked were very awkward.
Yeah, very awkward. But I really think it's a really good point, the idea of perspective taking. He had the example then of some person with shitty shoes looking at someone without any shoes as their perspective. It's like all of us, we can... it's common for us to keep up with the Joneses effect. We're always looking at those, keeping up with the Adam Joneses. Yeah. Maybe not me. You don't have to worry too much about that. But that's a choice. Or like the flip side of that is I just came up with this earlier. Let me know what you think. Keeping up with the Kenyans will give you endless gratitude.
Keeping up with the Kenyans.
So keeping up with the Joneses, looking for someone in your culture who's doing better. There. But keeping up with the Kenyans, so you're just looking at everyone who's doing worse than you. And, that's the difference between suffering and gratitude.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you like it?
I think there's something there. It probably needs a bit of work still. But there's
Keeping up with the Kenyans.
There's something there.
Is it politically incorrect?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit not
it's all right.
completely PC, but it's all right.
Do we have any Kenyans listening?
Is Daniel's mate still listening? We didn't say Daniel. We got rid of him in the end because he just spammed our website full of dick pills and stuff. He put up a whole bunch of random posts.
Daniel was really weird in the end. And when he was running this is a bit of a side topic. Yeah. But when I was single, he was running my Tinder, and he was running my Tinder, speaking to all girls on that to try and get me dates. And I didn't really care too much, and his English wasn't that good. But he kept just saying to every chick on it, what did he say?
I'm restless.
That's right.
I'm restless.
I'm restless. And so this is coming from me, like a Western bloke, the chick thought, and this dude's a weirdo. Yeah. Anyway, so we got him off the Tinder as well.
Yeah. He started strong, but we had to get rid of him in the end.
Yeah.
The next, we'll skip a few. We've picked out the best. I think we've done about 51 or 52 interviews. We picked out the best 18 or 20 or so. The next one we did is season 2, and kicked it off with JP Sears, who's the long red-headed dude, does funny satirical videos, a bit of a viral sensation. And it was actually a similar sort of theme in that he says here, we need to let go of that which served us, but no longer serves us. So where we've got to now, obviously we've built up a lot of story and a lot of identity and a lot of ideas around who we are and what we do and how we should do it. And it's got us to where we are. But sometimes we really need to be analytical and look at that and think, should I keep holding on to these things and are they going to keep moving me forward?
So the idea of,
or should I start to change my
let
mind?
go
So you need to
of
be
that
open
which served
to
you that
firstly
no
assessing
longer
these things,
serves
and then
you
secondly be
has a lot
open
to do with, I
changing
think,
your
our
ideas,
beliefs
letting go of
and
some of those
who
things
we
from the
think
past,
we are.
and adding a few new
So
things in.
I believe there is incredibly little correlation with who we are and who we think we are. So yet we all have beliefs of self, and I dare say they serve us when we adopt them. You know, when I was 3 years old, I thought who I am is my mommy's little boy. That's who I am. And if I didn't, I mean, that's kind of an easy one to let go of. But if I didn't let go of that, like I'd be 36 still functioning as a 3-year-old mama's boy. It served me awesomely when I was 3. Doesn't serve me when I'm 36.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that's obviously a very easy example, but I think other examples of things we adopt that serve us once upon a time, but probably have a shelf life, would be what we do to grow ourselves, to heal ourselves. Because a strategy that we use to grow ourselves, guess what? If it works, it's going to make us grow. Which, if we do the math, that means eventually we're going to outgrow it.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, being in grade 5 serves us well, but we freaking outgrow that. After 2 or 3 years of being in grade 5. I think I mastered that. But it's comfortable being in grade 5. We've mastered the material. So it can be very tempting to stay attached to what served us while we still think that it's serving us because we're stuck in the past, because it did serve us. So we still think it does. So it's like if we're in the middle of the ocean with a life preserver, you know, stormy seas, ship goes down. Awesome. Our life preserver is going to be serving us well. But if a couple decades goes by, that life preserver is going to be waterlogged. It's actually going to be a weight pulling us down. But if in our mind we're still attached to our story that says, this life preserver helped save my life when the ship went down, therefore it's still saving my life, we can be holding on to the anchor while thinking it's a buoyant force in our life. And we start to wonder, why is there friction? Well, you know, why am I not happy? Why are things not working well? I would dare say the things are fine, but what we're holding on to is limiting us.
Yeah, I really like that, letting go of the things that don't serve us, because if you're someone who wants to grow, inherent in that is going to change, and as you change, the old version of yourself needs to die a little bit. So it's a little bit scary on the road to growth, but Big JP's all about it.
Man, so at this point now, we've probably done, 10 or 12 interviews or so. Obviously, we're getting a little bit more rep, we're getting a little bit more practice in, getting better and better and better guests. But this one here was a massive inflection point. This was almost exactly 12 months into the show. We got the big man, Seth Godin.
You're number one.
Yeah.
I think, you shot off the email. We put a lot of effort into that. I think in the email, it wasn't just the normal one. You actually had we laid out all Seth's books, so he knew we were legit fans. Yeah. And how many books has he got? Like 20 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got them all. Yeah.
So that was in the signature, or just below the signature as well. And he said, yep, we're ready to rock and roll. 3 days time at this time, and we just made it work. Yeah. Did the interview and had a bit of Johnny Walker after to celebrate.
Mate, we did it at like 6 or 7 a.m. and then smashed a Johnny Blue label afterwards. Man, I think he actually said it when he sent the email. He said it was about 6 days. We didn't hear back from him. And then he said, sorry for the delay. Are you guys free tomorrow? And we're like, yeah, of course. Yep. Yeah, we're free.
It's extraordinary how many people will eagerly give up their freedom. They go into debt because it gives them boundaries and helps them know what to spend. They sign up for a specific kind of course in college because there's homework and because there's tests. That having someone tell us what to do has been built into our education system from the beginning. That we are trained to know that we can succeed if we know what's on the test. But if there's a test, it means you don't really have freedom. So when we talk about the freedom to create, let's say you're going to try to make a life as a musician, it's tempting to start a cover band because a cover band gets you off the hook and prevents you from having to deal with some of the issues of, what, you wrote that, right? And so of the million musicians you and I might listen to in a given year, 900,000 of them have traded their freedom and tried to make music that sounds like someone else. They want to be the next Bob Dylan, not this Tom Hopkins. And the internet has opened the door for an enormous amount of freedom in the way we make a career, in how we interact with the world, in what we say, in the music we make or listen to, and we relentlessly give it up. We click on clickbait, we read the popular stuff, we try to fit in, and I'm against it, and I've devoted my career to being against it.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people are waiting to get picked because, as I said, it lets you off the hook. Picking yourself takes no time whatsoever. Picking yourself well is what Steve Pressfield's book, The War of Art, is about, and his other book, Do the Work. And in those books, what he argues is that sometimes we pick ourselves to do some giant impossible project, because that's another form of hiding. Well, how can you expect me to have accomplished anything? I picked this project. I was on the airplane the other day, and the flight attendant was a big fan, and he was talking to me. He said, I'm gonna leave this job soon and start my own thing. I said, what are you going to start? He said, an indoor golf center. I said, an indoor golf center, it's going to cost you $5 million to start an indoor golf center. He said, yeah, I know, it's going to take a long time. And I said, well, why don't you just start something on the weekends that doesn't cost any money at all to start? And he looked at me. It had never occurred to him that he could do that, which is, of course, ridiculous because he's a smart guy. The reason it had never occurred to him is once it occurs to him, he has to do it because it's not a dream anymore. You can start on Saturday, right? You can go to 5 garage sales, buy a bunch of old plates, sell them on eBay, make a profit, do it again next week. Do it. And the next thing you know, a year from now, you have enough money to buy an indoor golf center. But of course you don't want to because who wants an indoor golf center?
That's right. Yeah, he's got some really interesting career advice there, old Seth. Like before I probably read Seth's books and got a chance to speak to him, for a lot of people you think the 50-hour, 60-hour work weeks and just the traditional corporate jobs, being in law and engineering and all of this has a huge utility. But Seth's style is completely different, where you can actually build scarcity and value and a brand through projects that are required by a certain niche and type of people. So there's just two different ways of doing things, of getting started, and what you will learn would fit into the Seth category for sure.
Yeah, so we've done 5 of Seth's books, I think, on the podcast: The Dip, Tribes, Purple Cow, Poke the Box, and This Is Marketing. And there's still a couple to go. So there's one big one which is next up for us, mate, Linchpin, which we'll have to do as the next Seth book. And that's it's not so much about just not along the lines of quit your job and do a project on the side whatsoever, but just I guess the shift from being the person who does what they're told and you've got a job and you do it to more of the poke the box style of taking the initiative and starting something else. So thinking for yourself and taking that responsibility, taking that ownership, and not just being another cog in the machine.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's so much better, obviously, his style, but our automatic choice is, as he was saying there, is like to not do that. It's to be sitting down, told what to do, get into debt, and just follow this merry-go-round of just predictability that's coming in the future, right? But it's so obviously more painful, that road, but it's just it's the default checkbox view. It is easier in a way.
Mate, and we made a bit of an error. We almost got him back for round 2. So about 9 months ago, when I first heard that he was This Is Marketing was coming out in about 3 months' time from that point, and we got in touch and he said, cool, can we do a round 2, promote the new book? He's like, yeah, cool, let's do it. Do you want to do it now, or do you want to wait and we'll do it when the book comes out? And I thought, we'll maintain our integrity, journalistic integrity. We always like to read the book first and then talk about the book, rather than just a lot of other shows which pretend to read the book. So we said, we'll wait. and then we waited, and he was too busy. So we
Yeah,
couldn't fuck
fell
that one
apart.
up.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Mate, the another one we had next up is big bad Frans Johansson, who is the author of The Medici Effect and The Click Moment, which when I first read The Click Moment, mate, it was one of my faves. It was a phenomenal book, and it's still very high in our top 50 best books of all time as well.
So yeah, The Click Moment. When I first read it, it really blew my mind because it was the first time I came across this idea of that the whole world's uncertain, and the way to capitalize on this uncertainty is to place bets. And then eventually, if you place enough bets, it's just a whole game of probability. Sooner or later, one of those bets is going to take off. And this is what he calls is a click moment. He's got a whole bunch of different examples in the book, but it really changed my perspective about how to do some things.
We create click moments by inviting difference into our lives. So let's take an example that I think drives this point home pretty quickly. But most people that are listening to this have been exposed to a game called Angry Birds, and it's kind of out of fashion now, but it was a game changer for both the iPad and the iPhone. It revealed to the world that there was a much larger industry around gaming on these type of handheld devices that people had even imagined. It was downloaded, hundreds of millions, billions across the world. And people looked at it and went like, wow, it was an overnight success. It was just brilliant. And it is a brilliant game. It has gorgeous graphics and addictive play levels. And you get to kill pigs with birds. Like who wouldn't want to do that? And the thing about this is that if they were that brilliant, why did they wait 8 years to do it? Because Angry Birds was this company's 50-second game.
Yeah.
And the message here to anybody listening to this is if you try something 52 times, you'll have a good shot at exceptional success as well. And that's really what it comes down to. Success, when stripped off of all the legends and myths, are basically a statistics game. I love this notion of the fact that Picasso made more crappy artwork than virtually any other artist that has lived at this point. And he did. I mean, he made over 50,000 works of art in his lifetime. And
most of them suck.
Most of them suck, right? So this idea is one that. So now, let's say that you now acknowledge this. How do you incorporate that into your life? How do you incorporate it into a strategy? It follows, by necessity, that you have to try more bets.
I really like this approach in that I think it's a different type of persistence. One type of persistence is thinking, hey, I've got the best idea. I'm going to go for it and stick to it until it works. But this other type of persistence says a bit more humbly, look, you don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So you've got to try a whole bunch of different things to find out in the real world, not just in your mind, what's going to work. So it's not the persistence of sticking with one thing, but the persistence of each time something doesn't work, try the next one. So persistence of continually trying things that may or may not work.
Yeah, he's got some really good ideas there. Mate, to be honest, I really think he put a bit of salt and pepper on his Picasso quote there.
50,000?
50,000.
That was in originals as well. I think that's...
No, I don't believe it. It's 3 a year, roughly, just below.
Oh, no.
3 a year,
yeah, not
times
paintings.
over 50 years. Yeah, but even three a day for 50 years. What was the life expectancy back then? Mate, someone just added a bit of salt and pepper in the 18th century. And then from there, Adam Grant and Frans, they're quoting this person from the 18th century or something. No one's drawn 50,000 anything in their whole life,
little
mate.
drawings. That might not take long.
No, mate, just didn't happen.
Well, mate, I'm sticking by it, and that the more things you try, the better you're going to get at it. There's no doubt about it.
50,000's a bit over the top. But anyway, he was great. And so was Naomi Simson, who didn't come too far after that. So she's a shark on Shark Tank Australia. She heads up Red Balloon, an awesome business. And we were invited to the headquarters in Sydney. And I felt, first time I really felt pretty important in this podcast, just walking around there, and everyone just saw us going into Naomi's office, and felt pretty special, man.
That was actually, so this is probably 15 to 18 months in, where we'd finally decided to increase the sound quality, where we bought a whole bunch of new mics, spent $1,000 or so buying new mics and really flash equipment, and then we made this trip to Sydney where we interviewed 4 or 5 people in person, face to face with the new mics. I reckon this was a real inflection point here as well of getting a lot more serious about it. And Naomi was one of those really sick first guests.
Yeah, if you're not really excited to go to work, or you find it's harder to get out of bed, you just begin to think, is this where I want to spend my energy? I remember in my 30s, it's a long time ago, whatever one it was, but I remember thinking, gosh, these are the best years of my life. I've been in business for 10 years or so. Where do I want to give my energy? And especially as you go into family and your priorities begin to change, you go, wow, I've got unencumbered time. I can give it to any particular activity. Where am I going to do that? I really believe that the most precious resource we have is our time. Mm-hmm. And often when you're young, you don't see that. You think you've got endless amounts of time, whereas actually that's the most precious resource. You can always earn more money. You cannot earn more time. So the older I get, the stingier I get about my time. I don't know how you guys got a podcast.
That's what I was just thinking,
actually. So, just saying. Because I get really stingy with my time because I have to focus on what I want to get done. So I think that there is a natural evolution to that if you get there. But, somebody's going to lead these enterprises, and you might find, well, that's actually where I want to influence bigger audiences and bigger people, and I can do it inside a big business. There is no one way. And I promise you, I think there's a little bit too much stardom around this whole entrepreneur thing, and startups. A lot of people are going to lose a lot of money, and not every idea is great. There's more startups now than there's ever been before. The ecosystem, and people are chucking money at it without necessarily really understanding the exit, the outcome, and money is not the answer.
No, I do really like that idea. That I think it is at the moment, especially over the last couple of years, seems to be almost like a bit of a fantasy, a bit of fetishizing around startup and entrepreneurship. And I think she's probably right. There are probably too many people who could potentially lose a lot of money. Yeah,
and I really like how she spoke about impermanence. It's something that's come up a few times on the podcast, but it's, I think as you get older, you got no choice but to look at how much time you got left. When you're in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, you're like, oh shit, I'm probably going to cark it soon. But then if you are able to think about that very early days in your 20s, 30s, 40s, I think you are a much, much, much higher probability of climbing the right ladder that's on the right wall, as opposed to just climbing any old ladder. And then you get to 60 or 70 and then you're like, shit, that was on the wrong wall the whole time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like that, mate. I like that one a lot. While we were in Sydney during this trip, we also, the great man Dan Ariely was also in Sydney at the same time. He was traveling. He's written the book Predictably Irrational, is his biggest, I guess, most well-known book. He's done a whole bunch of awesome TED Talks, which are very, very popular as well, millions and millions of views. And, mate, we were able to sit down with him in his hotel room over a bottle of good Australian wine and have a good chat.
Yeah.
Mate, he didn't like that wine, did he?
He didn't like that one at all, nah. Well, at that stage, we're not wine connoisseurs. So we thought it tasted all right.
Yeah. I thought it was on the upper end of my it was like a $20 wine. Most of the time I'd buy like an $8 to $12 bottle, so I thought it was an expensive one.
But in that same trip though, right, he was meeting with all the bank execs all across Australia and meeting with us two idiots. So I'm guessing the rest of his trip he was drinking the top bloody shelf, red aged for a couple of centuries kind of stuff, and comes to our Yellow Glen.
I'd say so, mate. And then we went to the ballet with the great man afterwards as well. And along a similar vein, we thought, we'll do the interview, then we'll take him to dinner, then we'll go to the ballet. So we loaded up the accounts, ready to go to a 5-star restaurant and spend a couple of $100 on a meal. And just as we were walking to the ballet, you saw a kebab shop on the side of the road and said, let's get a kebab. Phenomenal.
Yeah, so procrastination is a general problem about short-term versus long-term. So think to yourself, in the last month, have you eaten more than you think you should?
Yes.
Yes. Exercise less than you think you should?
Yes.
Texted while driving?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Not always wash your hands when you left the bathroom?
Only if there's
I'm gonna say no.
depends who's watching.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's actually something that people don't do, but really are much more embarrassed. It's much more embarrassing to admit than when you text and drive, right? Even though it's not that dangerous. And you can go on and on, right? Unsafe sex, all kinds of things like that. And the reality is that with everything that has with short-term gratification versus long-term benefit, we don't do it well. And here's a very general example. Imagine I had the best chocolate in the world. And I said, you could have half a box now or a full box in a week. Half now, and I kind of pass it around. So you could see it, you could smell it. Most people say, not worth waiting another week for a full box. I'll take the half box now. Case number 2, I said, what would you rather have? A half a box of chocolate in a year or a full box of chocolate in a year and a week? It's the same question. Is it worthwhile waiting another week for another half a box of chocolate? But now people say, of course it is, right? Because in the future, we're wonderful people. We would exercise, we would diet, we'll take our medication. The future is full of just wonders. We don't get to live in that future, right? We get to have good plans about the future, but in the present, we fail time after time after time.
Yep.
It's because the present is tempting us in a very different way. So if I say, half a box of chocolate in a year, a full box of chocolate in a year in a week, none of them has temptation. You're thinking rationally about it. When I say half a box of chocolate now, and you could see it, and you could smell it, emotion basically get invoked. And now giving up something that you feel emotional about is very, very difficult. And that's the basic issue with procrastination. In principle, we know what we want to do, but in the short term, we're tempted by all kinds of things, how to use our money, how to use our time, and so on.
Yeah, it's a big deal not giving into instant gratification. You're always better doing it for the long term, but listening to a behavioral economist, you can actually really understand your irrationality toward giving into that short-term stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Almost everything is going to be better if we wait to do it later rather than instantly, rather than spending money short-term now on buying lunch. If we save and go on a holiday at the end of the year, that's probably going to be better. Same as, exercise is a bit of short-term pain rather than, sitting on the couch, which is more easy now. If we put off sitting on the couch now, we're going to have a much more better lifestyle later on. So I think it's really important. And as he says, in the future, it's easy to think, I'll work out after work, I'll go to the gym. When you get to that point of after work, it's a lot easier to sit on the couch. And, mate, another takeaway for me there is I've got to be careful when I'm shaking hands with you next time, mate. It sounds like you don't wash your hands after the toilet.
No, I do, mate. I'll just say some things just to go along with the interviewer. And I'm a very hygienic man. Yeah.
I'm not buying that for a second, mate. Mate, the next Dan, after Dan Ariely, was Dan Pink.
Oh, yeah.
Who the author of Free Agent Nation, A Whole New Mind, and then Drive, To Sell Is Human, and When. And so we talked in this snippet here about book Drive, which is probably one of the first 10 or 15 episodes we ever did about motivation and why we do what we do.
Yeah, it's one of the really the best books going out when it comes down to motivation and what makes us really enjoy what we're doing with our work. It comes down to autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And this was like a good base for a lot of other books that kind of sprung off these 3 principles. I mean, it's a really big thing. If you can trade in your work or try and push your work in the direction of those 3 attributes, with autonomy, so you got freedom about what you're going to do, mastery, that you're doing something difficult, or purpose, like you feel like you're giving something to the world, then, it has a massive impact.
Yeah, one way to, in the past, that people were either employers tried to motivate their employees or we tried to motivate ourselves was extrinsic motivation of the carrot and the stick. We try to reward good behavior so we get more of it, and we punish bad behavior so we get less of it. But Pink said that only works up to a certain point. And beyond that point, if the work is not just a heuristic, do this and you get that, like if you need some kind of thinking, some kind of emotional element to it, some kind of tough thinking and knowledge work around it, it comes down to that intrinsic motivation of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. But one of the questions that I had for him was that, purpose, he talked about in the book, if you're maybe ending world poverty or saving climate change, or if you're, the kid who can't go to school because he doesn't have shoes, you give him a pair of shoes, like they're massive purpose in world-changing circumstances. But I said, what about someone who's working in a bank, for an example, that isn't changing the world in a massively positive way in that regard? How does that person still get purpose out of their job?
Because that's the majority of us.
Yeah, it's a great question at the individual level. And I have to say, this is one area where I felt like in the book Drive, I didn't get it quite right. And I'm sort of changed my thinking a little bit, and maybe it'll be helpful on this. So when we think about purpose, my view now is that purpose is really two things. There are two kinds of purpose. And the way that I look at it is this. This is not necessarily the best way, but it's the best way that I've come up with right now. You can think of purpose with a capital P, right? Big capital P purpose. And that is the sort of purpose that I wrote about in the book. Are you putting shoes on people who don't have shoes? Are you feeding the hungry? Are you tackling the climate crisis? Are you helping your country move away from dependence on fossil fuels? And that's really important, and the evidence is clear that that's a big motivator. The trouble is, as the atoms are saying, is that in many jobs, it's very hard to access that. And it's certainly very hard to access that every single day. So I think there's a second kind of purpose out there, which you can think of as small p purpose. And that's simply not, am I making a difference, but am I making a contribution? If I didn't show up today, would anybody care? If I didn't show up today, would this report not go out? If I didn't show up today, would this customer be disappointed? And that ends up being actually really important as well. And there's some very interesting research. It's not in the book. It only came out maybe 2 years ago that I love. It's a study of cafeterias out of Harvard Business School, a study of cafeterias. And what they found, to just cut to the chase, is that when, typically in a cafeteria, the cooks are in the back. They can't see the customers. But when you rig up an iPad that allows the cooks to see the customers, the quality of the food improves.
Oh, awesome.
Now, so this is not capital P purpose. The people at this cafeteria in Massachusetts in the eastern United States, they're not starving. They're not destitute. All right. But the fact that, it's so interesting when the cooks say, wait a second, someone's going to eat that cheese omelet. I'm going to do a little bit better. That is small p purpose. Am I making a contribution? And so for people who are stuck in jobs where capital P purpose is a big reach, look for those instances of small p purpose.
Very good by the Pink Man. I hope you didn't listen to any of our songs that we used to.
One of the Pink, two in the stink.
Oh, that doesn't get
it. Okay, go.
But yeah, I hope he doesn't listen to any of our songs that we used to do. Big Pinky.
Mate, there was also the To Sell Is Human episode where the neighbour didn't like our recording. That's worth going back to for a laugh as well.
Yeah,
To Sell Is Human.
Maybe we'll do that a bit later in the show. Next up, we got Big Dan Heath, who is the author, along with his brother, his twin, of heaps of books.
I don't think they're twins.
Well, they sound like twins.
They look very, very different. Big Dan and Big Chip, yeah.
Oh, they're pretty much the same person, though.
Yeah,
they're both
brothers,
authors.
yeah.
And anyway, they wrote, I was about to say they sung. We sung, but they wrote Made the Stick, Switch, Decisive, The Power of Moments. They're really, really good authors. They put complex information in very easy to digest kind of metaphors and examples.
Yeah, nice and simple. Always like Switch was 3 steps, Power of Moments was 4 different things. Mate, this is one of my more enjoyable interviews, more from the sense that Dan Heath specifically requested to listen to the book episode beforehand. He made references to that episode, so he wasn't like repeating the same info. And the biggest one was at the start, we had a conversation with him, and he said he really enjoyed the song that we sung, The Power of Moments. He said he was going to record it, play it to himself every morning before he gets in the shower, just as a bit of motivation. I don't know how serious he was, but it was one of our better songs.
Was that right?
The Power of Moments, yeah, it's worth going back to listen to if you haven't heard that one. But here's Big Dan Heath.
One of the things we talk about in the book is really one of the simplest, which is the idea of a gratitude visit. And this is in the discipline of positive psychology, where psychologists are studying what are things that make us happier. This is probably what would be considered a greatest hit. And so the instructions are very simple. You just think of someone who's made a difference in your life, and you write them a little letter that talks about what they did for you and why it was so important. And then here's the important part. You actually deliver it face to face. Yeah. And so if you can physically get in the same room with them, that is plan A, B, and C. If that's utterly impossible because you're across the world, do it on Skype or somewhere where you can see each other on video. But the research is is just astonishing. What they find is that people who deliver a gratitude visit like that are happier for a full month afterwards.
Wow.
A month. I mean, there are a lot of pleasures in this world that can spike your happiness level for minutes or hours. There are very, very few that last a month. And that's leaving aside, by the way, how the people you delivered the gratitude letter to feel. I mean, imagine how good that must feel to have someone, come out of their way to tell you how important you've been to them. So on a personal basis, I think that's something anybody listening to this can do in the next week to make a big impact in your own life and someone else's.
Yeah, I feel like the gratitude visit falls in that category of something that's extremely effective and gives you a lot, but at the same time is really, really uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable, man.
But it adds so much to you and the person you're just saying thank you to, rather than just being really flippant and doing it in, like the text message or at a birthday. You just do it out of the blue. Go up to them, give them a note to their face, let them know what you are grateful for specifically. And it has a massive impact.
Yeah, it does. Mate, that book, The Power of Moments, one of the big things I really liked in there was he talked about the idea of elevate, which is that saying that, say if you've got like throughout the day, you're going to have a few pretty flat, sometimes a little bit up, sometimes a little bit down, sometimes a big drop off, sometimes a big peak. He says that we need to firstly fill those massive pits in terms of anything that's really, really, really bad. We try to make that bring that back to a normal sort of level. But then if there's little potholes along the way, he says just ignore those and focus on making the peaks as high as possible. So I think that's where the gratitude visit ties into. That's a phenomenal peak, man, if you were to receive one of those bad boys. And also, as you said, for you, giving it selfishly as well is going to make you feel really good as well.
The next interview we're going to play now is Big Annie Duke. So she's a poker superstar. I highly recommend going and checking her out on YouTube if you're into poker. But in her book, Thinking in Bets, I think poker is really an amazing analogy for what life is. And a different game of poker that a lot of people see life as, in the metaphor that they use, is chess. And it's not really like chess because in chess, there's always a better move there that is can be acquired by logic to get you to finally win the game. Whereas poker, on the other hand, it's a game of incomplete information. It means a novice with a shit hand can end up winning. So it's a game of probabilities. And what you do in poker is you put out minimum bets to get some more information, and then eventually these minimum bets, and you play to the expected value of what an outcome might be, and your bet needs to be proportional to how much expected value you get from it to eventually win the game. So I think it's an incredible metaphor for how to play the game of life.
Yeah, I like that a lot, man. And what she talks about a lot as well is a lot of these cognitive biases that impact upon our decision making as to why we might make the wrong decision, but also how we evaluate the decisions we have made. So things like hindsight bias and resulting, where if something works out, we say, yeah, that was a good decision, and if something doesn't work, we say that was a bad decision. But she said that's not necessarily true. You need to differentiate the result with the decision, because sometimes you can make a bad decision and get lucky, or you can make a good decision and it doesn't quite work out. So that's what she talks about here, that we need to separate the result from the decision and focus on making the best decisions we possibly can.
Okay, so if we think about it, whenever we make a decision, there's a set of possible outcomes that could happen. Some good, some bad, some mediocre, but there's a lot of different ways it could go. So if I go out and I'm driving through an intersection, I could get through safely, I could get a ticket, I could get into an accident, I could get into a near accident, a variety of things could happen. But we act like, once we know the outcome, that we know exactly what happened, right? So we don't really understand very well the uncertainty in the way that things turn out. That, just because you make great decisions doesn't mean that you have great results, at least not on one try. Just because you make bad decisions doesn't mean you have bad results. Likewise, so we don't really understand the uncertainty there. But the other thing that we really aren't very good at is understanding the uncertainty in our own beliefs. If I give you enough time, I can get there. So if I say to you, can you think of something that you believed for certain when you were 15 that you now believe was just, hooey? And you're like, sure, yes, everything I believed when I was 15 was very right. But at the time Right. Yeah. So, well, now I want to hear more.
We'll stay away from conspiracy theories today. It's for another day.
So if I give you a lot of time, if I give you a lot of years in between, you'll recognize, oh yeah, I have some beliefs that I thought that were really certain, but maybe I was actually a little bit wrong about them. And in the history of humans, we can see this. We used to think that the sun revolves around the earth, for example. So there's a lot of uncertainty in our beliefs, and generally our beliefs shouldn't actually sit in the right or wrong category. They should sit in between in the in progress category.
I think that's super important to realize that either way, you're never going to be 100% certain that this is definitely correct, or I'm 100% certain that this is definitely incorrect. We're always somewhere between 0% and 100%. So you need to realize that changing your mind doesn't mean shifting from 100% to 0%. It might mean shifting from 70% sure to 40% sure.
Yeah, man, we almost fell down the conspiracy rabbit hole there. Quite recently, or a few months ago, you went down the Alex Jones rabbit hole. So where are you in the rabbit hole at the moment?
I haven't listened to Alex Jones since for a fair while, but mate, it's worth having listened to.
What's your limit of rabbit hole in terms of conspiracy shit you believe?
Mate, apparently the Chinese...
Here we go, mate. Go on. What are the Chinese doing?
Mate, well, the second episode that Alex Jones did with Joe Rogan a couple of months ago is worth a listen to, man. It was almost 5 hours. It was over 4.5 hours, I think. And fuck, man, he dropped some serious bombs in that. Mate, they're killing babies and harvesting their organs.
Yeah. So you believe everything that comes out of Jonesy's mouth, including the
I think for most people in the world, we're between 0% and 100%. For Alex Jones, he's 100% sure of everything. And he's right, yeah.
Jesus. It's pretty far down the rabbit hole, mate.
Not quite.
Let's move on. Let's get out of this hole. Next up, we got big Kevin Kelly, man. He's awesome. He was someone who, before we started, would have loved the opportunity to speak to Kev, the real futurist kind of writer, all about the new technologies that are really going to shape the world, which I think is the title of his book, The Inevitable.
Yeah.
The technological forces that are going to shape our future.
I think you're pretty close there, man.
Yeah.
Mate, so Tim Ferriss talks about Kevin Kelly a lot. He calls him the most interesting man alive. He was mate, I thought VR was pretty new, in the last couple of years. Kevin Kelly was playing on VR in the 80s. So, mate, he's both extremely early in terms of internet technology in the early days, but also now, looking ahead, mate, his book Inevitable really opened our eyes to what's to come.
The thing I want to stress is that this is true of both virtual reality and artificial intelligence and some of these other ones coming along, is that there are no experts compared to where we'll be in 30 years. And that you'll learn more by buying some gear and fooling around with it and trying to make something in it than you'll ever learn by reading anything about it or going to school. And if you pursue that, if you stuck with that for a year, you would become the world's expert on it.
Yeah, sounds like fun.
Okay? And in AI right now, you can buy, right this minute, you can log on to Google TensorFlow and you can purchase some AI. You can go to Microsoft and on Azure and you can buy some AI and you can start messing around with it. And if you do that, it's very cheap. If you do that and pursued it, within a year, you would be one of the world's experts on using this stuff. And you might even get some ideas messing around with stuff that you could do. And by the way, 99% of those ideas will fail to become a business. Mm-hmm. That's just the nature of it. So you have to accept that that this area, because it's so unproven, because it's marginal, because it's in the startup zone, it's the death zone. Mm. That's why the big companies aren't there. It's because it's very hard, on average, to make money here. That's why the people who have very little to lose and can have more time than money can make an advantage. That's where all the startup and innovation is going to come from, because you can't really buy innovation. I mean, if innovation was something you could buy, all the big companies with lots of money would buy it. Apple would just millions of dollars. They would just buy it. You can't really buy it. You have to earn it and grow it. It has to come from something that money can't buy, which is tons of failures.
Mm-hmm.
Big companies are allergic to losing money on failures. They can't afford that. But young people and people starting off can afford to fail because they don't have much to lose.
I really like that idea of tinkering. When it comes to technology and disruption, there's going to be a lot of opportunities, man, in the next few decades. And because there's such disruptive technologies, universities aren't there and ready to educate you. So if you want to actually lead the pack in some of these areas, the only way to lead the pack is to just buy some of it, just tinker around with it, play around on weekends. And who knows, eventually, just by playing around with it, you might actually be one of the so-called experts, ironically, the one teaching it in the universities.
Man, I like that he says you can't buy innovation. It only comes from a lot of failures. And that idea of tinkering, getting out there, playing around, one thing is to read about it, think about it, talk about it, watch videos about it, take courses about it. But really, the real learning comes from actually just getting out there and doing it, getting your hands dirty, playing around with it. Mate, you threw me under the bus with Alex Jones, so I'll throw you under the bus with tinkering, mate.
You can't throw me under the bus here.
Mate, so after you read Black Swan, I reckon the word serendipity came up in 8 of the next 10 episodes. I've got a feeling if everyone listening, Adam Jones just read Anti-Fragile, I reckon 8 of the next 10 episodes, tinkering will come up.
I'm obsessed with tinkering.
Keep your ears out.
Well, the opposite of tinkering is just staying put, right? And there's only downside to staying put.
Mate, I don't disagree with the idea of
tinker, you've got an option. So if you tinker, you can actually go back to where you were previously or upgrade to the new thing you tinkered to.
That's it, yeah.
There's an analogy Nicholas Taleb Nassim doesn't use in the book, but I just made up in my own brain as I was trying to get to sleep the other night. But if you're a tinkerer, if you think of the analogy of monkeys swinging from vine to vine, and you only the amount you tinker are the more vines that present themselves. So you can grab a tinker on the low dip of the vine or the up dip of the vine. So if you tinker at the right thing, you can keep tinkering upwards, and upwards on these vines, as opposed to just staying on the same vine in the same position. Do I need to still work on that metaphor?
Yeah, sorry. I was with you at the start and then I lost you. We've got a couple of weeks before we do Anti-Fragile, so
brush up on it a little bit.
One. The next person we spoke to was Peter Singer, who is the most influential living philosopher. Had a decades-long career where books like Animal Liberation, Practical Ethics, The Life You Can Save, The Most Good You Can Do. So we talked about the idea of utilitarian philosophy and the idea of that all of us are not probably doing the most good that we can do. We can do things better. Most of us aren't doing too bad, but we could definitely do with a few small tinkerings, with a few small tweaks.
Absolutely.
We can probably do a little bit better.
Yeah, his whole style of writing and his whole jam can be really summed up by this quote he pulls out at the end of his book. I guess basically one wants to feel that one's life is accounted to more than just consuming products and generating garbage. I think that one likes to look back and say that one's done the best one can do to make this a better place for others. What greater motivation is there than doing what you can to reduce pain and suffering in the world? Which again, I think it's a really big deal, man. If you get to the end and you look back and you know you've done net positive contribution, then you've probably job done. The average person might be selfish or whatever. So how does someone go about actually make that switch to become selfless and all of a sudden start looking at effective altruism and actually trying to make a net positive impact in the world? What's the switch there? And I don't know if this is a question in the philosophy area as well, but
it's an area of philosophy that overlaps with psychology, I guess. And let me just say one thing: it's not a question of becoming selfless, as I said before. There are very few saints who are completely selfless, and I don't think there's much point in trying to get people to be like that. I think the point is to get people to be open to thinking more about others. They're still going to think more about themselves than about strangers, and more about their own children than about the children of strangers. But there is plenty of room, especially people who live in affluent societies and don't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from. There's plenty of room to do good things for others. And this is where the psychology research comes in. There's lots of evidence that actually you will find that fulfilling, that you'll enjoy your life more if you're open to helping others, that it gives you purposes which go beyond yourself and purposes which actually don't become sort of, there's a thing called the hedonic treadmill, that if you try and say, oh, well, I want to have more consumer goods, I want to drive a better car, I want to, have a bigger house, that these things make you happy for a short while, but after a while that disappears. Whereas the rewards of helping others and knowing that you're living in accordance with your values seem to be lasting ones.
Yeah, that hedonic treadmill is it's a great one to jump off, I think.
Yeah, that idea that we could be doing a lot more. So if we're buying our next car rather than buying the $80,000 car to make ourselves feel good, if we buy the $30,000 car and use that $50,000 to do something really effective for people far less fortunate, is going to be a way different net positive effect on the world. So, and it's just that's a massive example, but it's even the small things he talks about. That it's a couple of bucks a day that could be better directed.
Mate, at the end of the life you can save, he's got a rolling pay scale thing, percentage.
Yeah.
Do you do it?
No. Do you?
We both said we would. Mate, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Can you make me do it and embarrass me if I don't?
Yeah, there's a couple of times that we've said that we would and we still haven't.
I think someone emailed us and we kind of somehow justified it that we did.
Yeah.
So
that was one of the questions in the Q&A last time, wasn't it? I remember you justified it.
We rationalised it, but it was a bit of a bullshit rationalisation, I think.
Mate, 6 months on and nothing's changed. So we need to lift on that.
Yeah, fuck. We're on the hedonic treadmill.
Yeah.
You got hedonic adaptation. And when I got the pay bump, I got hedonic overexceedance.
Just didn't even keep up, just went beyond. That's not good, mate. That's not good.
Ran off the treadmill.
Mate, the next person we spoke to, and this is the last one we've got from our season 2 batch, is Tom Peters. And so he's one of the original management gurus in the 1980s. He wrote the book In Search of Excellence, which is like one of the first real mainstream business books that really sort of opened the doors for all the books that we've done on the podcast, really, that took it outside of the academic papers and the professional journals and made it something more accessible to the mainstream. And I just realized, man, I've set you up here because this snippet that we're about to talk about is all about tinkering.
Ooh.
One thing I really liked when you talk about innovation, whoever tries the most stuff wins. Whoever screws up the most stuff wins. So I think it's applicable to companies big and small and individuals as well.
I completely agree. I mean, I call it, I will never be able to get the letters down. Whoever tries the most stuff and screws the most stuff up the fastest wins. And I require guys like you and me to remember the letters, like WTT, MSA, F2T.
I think you do okay.
Hey, why not? You know what I said about it in the book, and I've said it before, is I have a pretty good science-based training. For every hypothesis, there is an equal and opposite hypothesis, with one exception, and this is it. Whoever tries the most stuff wins. And the problem with it is the same problem that exists, and we've been talking about it now for several minutes, is to have an organization that lives, whoever tries the most stuff wins, you have to have a culture that honors playfulness. Mm-hmm. Michael Schrage, who's an MIT Media Lab professor, actually wrote an entire book a few years ago that was called Serious Play. And playfulness doesn't mean sloppy. It doesn't mean it means you just get off on trying something. And it becomes, as I said, an entire culture of the organization. And it's also a problem. And I think it's the same problem. Always find me a school system anywhere in the world where kids are not primarily punished for screw-ups. And, there's this terrific one-liner in the book that comes from a very successful Sydney, Australia businessman. And he says, the 6 most important words behind my business success are reward excellent failures, punish mediocre successes. It's interesting that Michael Bloomberg said the same thing at one point. He said, if somebody really makes an exciting screw up from which we learn something, promote them. The best failer gets promoted at some level. And Bezos said the same thing. Bezos said, if you want to survive in today's world, right near the center of things is celebrating failures. And again, there's a way to do dopey stuff, which, you get questions like this. I get questions. Well, you don't want a sloppy person. You don't want to reward somebody who comes to work late. No, you know what an excellent failure is. And I know what an excellent failure. Somebody who puts their heart and their soul into something. And this isn't quite the right moment and it doesn't work. But oh my God, we learn a million things.
Yeah. Whoever tries the most stuff wins. I could just picture a monkey swinging off vines, getting to the top of the tree before all the other monkeys, because there's more vines coming because he tries swinging off more vines than the rest.
That was not bad, actually.
Yeah, I told you, man. It's biblical, that metaphor, that analogy.
Not bad, mate. Not bad. Mate, so that was the end of our season 2 interviews, and then we move on to the third and final batch here, which is our season 3 interviews. I mean, I reckon season 3 was another real uptick for us in terms of the way we did the podcast, in that at the very start we started off with literally hit record, talked 20 minutes of crap, and then hit stop and put it straight up. And then as we evolved, maybe we'd edit out some of the little fumbles and stuff ups, and then the next iteration we probably took a few more notes and we were a bit more planned. And by this stage now, season 3, we were both working off the same notes. We both sort of had the same run sheet. We knew where the direction was going. We knew what we were talking about. And we'd also not only just plan the episode based, chapter by chapter, page by page, but we'd add a bit of our own little salt and pepper in terms of engineering the episode. So rather than, taking them lesson by lesson, we thought, what's the best way to tell this story as an episode? So I think this is a real uptick here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bit of a cost in terms of what we narrated out from the
a
little bit of our own narration coming in, but I think we really added to the episode in most cases. One of the first interviews we did for season 3 was Rachel Botsman. So she's an extremely, extremely classy person. Top 50 thinkers of the world, massive TED Talk, absolutely elegant lady who we actually invited to do the interview at Ross House, which is one of those dingy, gross little old kind of places you could have in Melbourne. Yeah. But I think we got it for $50 or something.
Probably less, I reckon.
Probably less.
In future, we'll probably book a nicer place to record these in-person interviews in Melbourne. But this Ross House, if it's not bad for certain occasions, but for this occasion, the carpet's probably 40 years old, a few holes in the walls, a few lights that aren't quite working. There's often pretty loud. We probably should have... Mate, I don't know. I'm surprised she didn't just walk in and walk straight back out.
She just looked down the dingy old corridor with us two dingy, somewhat dingy people, and just turned her back and just got straight out. But thanks, Rach.
Yeah, it was a good chat. Her most recent book is called Who Can You Trust? And in this snippet, we talked about both you and I love the show Black Mirror. Man, it's actually coming again. There's a new episode in about 2 weeks.
Oh, really? Fantastic.
Start of June, I think. So we talked about this. There's this one episode which is a bit of a dystopian view of, at the moment, we rate our Uber driver, we rate the hotel we stay at. But this is saying that everybody rates everybody for every interaction. The person you buy a coffee from gives you a rating as to how you were. That when you're walking down the street, if you run into someone, they'll give you a bad rating because you're a douchebag. So all these ratings, and you've got this constant, personal rating, and different clumps of ratings all stick together. And then, certain ratings can't fly. Certain ratings can only buy certain houses. And we thought, oh, this is just, it's Black Mirror. It's obviously an extrapolation of the worst possible outcome. But apparently it's happening in the world.
I mean, this is George Orwell flipping in his grave. So in 2014, the Chinese government came out with this policy statement saying that half the country don't have traditional credit scores, and there's really high instances of fraud and counterfeit goods, and it's a low trust society beyond your extended circle. So how can we fix that? Well, by 2020, every Chinese citizen will have a mandatory trust score.
Wow.
And they will have a rating up to 950. But unlike your traditional credit score, it will be influenced on different dimensions. So one will be whether you pay your bills on time, kind of traditional credit indicators. The second will be what you actually buy. So they formed all these partnerships and then deemed certain things like nappies and work shoes good purchases because they show you're responsible, and then like video games, lazy purchases, so your score goes up and down.
That's unbelievable.
Then, and then what you say online and who your friends are could have influenced your score.
Oh, wow.
But what becomes weirder is if we're now connected somewhere in the online world, and I said something about Tiananmen Square, my score down, but your score would also go down.
Oh, no.
And you can see who's bringing your score down. So you can unfriend me.
Yeah.
And then you could also see who was positively influencing your score. So you'd want to spend more time with that person. So it's really, they pulled everyone in by offering all these incentives, these rewards. And then they announced, just like in that episode of Black Mirror, that more than 4.5 million Chinese can't get on airplanes because their trust score's too low, and their children can't go to certain schools, and you can't apply for certain jobs. So that's really gamified obedience. But the thing I find really fascinating about this was when I went to China, when I spoke to Chinese people, in China this is seen as a good thing because they've always had a system of people monitoring them, and they'll describe this as more transparent. And then they'll also say, you think you're so different in the West, but all this is happening. You live in a culture of surveillance. You just have no idea what's being watched, and you have no control over it.
I don't know what your score is.
You know what your score is?
I just saw you just shuffle your pants a little bit there, mate. When you heard surveillance in the West,
No, we've been
you're
watched. Matt, this episode might be taken down. We've already talked about Alex Jones a lot, and now we've just hung shit on China. So, mate, we
mate, you gotta climb
If
yourself
we get
out of
knocked
that
off.
hole before it's too late. Mate, you're not getting knocked off. We're just two blokes just recording a podcast. We're not getting knocked
I
off.
hope so, mate. I hope so.
The next up, we got Robert Cialdini, who I'd say is one of the most respected authors amongst authors. So it was someone who we really got a lot out of speaking to, but also in terms of leverage, because just as a side note, how we get more and more authors is you get one person, you leverage that name to get more, and you leverage that name to get more, and over time it gets that little bit easier and easier. So Cialdini, man, is a great name to leverage to other people.
Yeah, as we said, like getting Seth Godin was really a turning point in terms of getting more and more and more better and better guests. And then Cialdini, as you say, it's probably not someone that everybody in the general public knows, but the authors who are writing these types of books definitely know who he is. Because his phenomenal book from 1984, Influence, and then his more recent book from 2016, Persuasion, mate, they're just phenomenal, man. He's a marketing guru and just an all-round legend. Mate, this is a real Hail Mary to get this one. A bit of behind the scenes was that we, over the last probably 12 to 18 months before this, we'd sent a few emails, filled out the online form. Every now and then we'd try a different approach. We'd tinker around, try to find the right approach. And eventually, mate, I just went the Hail Mary phone call to his office, got through the gatekeeper to the other gatekeeper, used some of the weapons of influence on her.
Did ya?
And then eventually, after a bit of a chat on the phone, we were able to get through and spoke to the great man.
And what I'm doing now is looking at a particular problem that has to do with the principle of social proof. The idea that if a lot of other people are doing something, it's likely to be the right thing to do. So a communicator should always tell people, what is the most popular of their items, or that they have the largest selling product or service in the industry, this kind of thing. But the question is, what if you don't have the largest selling? What if you're a new startup? What if you're at the beginning and that isn't the case yet? Your major rival is that. Does that mean you can't use social proof? Well, most of the time, I would have to say, yes, use one of the other 6 principles then. Use authority or use scarcity, something like that. But we've recently found that actually you can use social proof even if you're in the minority of companies or maybe a startup, by telling people that there is a trend in your direction. So, for example, that 5 years ago, we had only 10% of the market share. 3 years ago, we had 15. This year, we have 30, right? That's dramatically more successful than just telling people we have 30% of the market share. If you tell them we have 30%, they can do the logic, the math, and say, well, then there's 70% of people who don't like it, right? But if you show them a trend to 30, now they jump on board.
Yeah, some good stuff. It is really hard when you're starting something to have social proof because it's that catch-22. How can you have social proof if no one's tried it? So that's a really good silver bullet from big Cialdini.
Yeah, I like that. I think he said that he's actually redoing his first book, Influence, in the next couple of years. So
that'll be interesting.
Maybe keep an eye out for round 2 with Big Bad Cialdini.
I don't know if it'll be a good idea or not because it was so good the first one. It's like watching the remake of The Lion King.
Yeah,
you know, I'm really nervous watching it, so I might be a bit nervous reading this one as well.
That's true.
See how we go. Next up,
anyway, he'll deliver the goods.
Yeah,
he'll deliver the goods.
We'll see. Next up, we got Mia Freedman, who's a superstar, great person, runs the whole Mamma Mia empire. I would say huge in podcasting in Australia, probably the biggest in podcasting.
The biggest
by daylight.
Yeah. So she had an awesome corporate career in journalism, magazines, and then TV. And then when she came to the end of her TV career, and she sort of went out on her own, started a little blog on the side, tinkered around with it, tried a few different things, tried to swing up that vine to the top of the monkey pile, and
that's exactly right.
And she has turned that into a massive international media empire in terms of online and in terms of, as you say, now Australia's biggest podcast network with 100+ staff. And mate, she's got I think they've got about 22, 23 podcasts. One of the podcasts is called Lady Startup, which she started and then handed over the reins to someone else. Mate, they're our competition for tomorrow night's 2019 Australian Podcast Awards.
I'd say they'd be favourites.
They'd be a strong favourite for the business and marketing category. I'd say we're a decent favourite for second spot.
Second spot, yeah. We'll see how we go.
And so they say that they want to have something that's theirs. And even if it is a side hustle, even if it doesn't make any money or if it makes a minimal amount of money or even if it's just, spare change money, it's theirs. The satisfaction that comes from work should never be underestimated because we don't just work for money. We also work for meaning.
Definitely. I think one thing that holds people back from starting businesses, I don't know if it's more or less for women, maybe you can tell us, but I think just the idea of it has to be, I've got this big idea and I have to build this perfect thing, whether it's I want to be on all the supermarket shelves or I want to have the perfect crisp video. I can't have just a cheap iPhone selfie version of my video.
Yep.
How can we counteract that? And what's this? Because it sounds like you started, this, whatever you did, it started as a small idea, not the big, massive worldwide thing.
It started with, you were saying you started with just recording off your iPhone
on
your podcast.
Oh, God, yes. We didn't have equipment. We didn't have a studio. It was, so I think that you don't want to let perfect be the enemy of done. And I think that that's really true. I'm really good at not being perfect because another thing that people talk about, perfectionism, that's often just a way of being scared. It's just a form of fear. Saying I can't do it unless it's perfect, or you're just too scared to do it. It's better to do something not perfectly than nothing and have it perfect in your brain.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. That hearing from the best podcaster in Australia, starting from the iPhone and then tinkering all the way to the best network in Australia. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And if anyone's sitting there right now thinking about doing a podcast and procrastinating over it, you just heard it then. You can just do it on your iPhone right now in the next hour, really, and just upload it and then just go from there. I mean, for us, we're in the similar kind of camp. As we said at the start of this episode, right, we just hit record and it was very shit. And then just over time, just gradually just got a little bit better every time.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that I do think that idea of perfectionism is something you need to let go, and that if you want to have the perfect Instagram feed of crisp with a graphic designer or if it's a podcast, you need to have the best equipment and you can't say any ums or you can't have any stuff ups, then you're probably never going to start. So as Mia Freedman was saying there, you really need to let that go and just start.
It's that I'm happy to drop the analogy again of the arena. Like perfectionism, you can't really hop into the arena if you got all the big armor on and you're slugging around the huge armor. You need to take the actual armor off to get into the arena and actually be vulnerable, to actually share what you want to share with the world, whatever that is. And part of the package deal, as we've said recently, is getting slammed down in the arena. So when you share your stuff at the start, you are vulnerable and someone might slap you up, but it's just all part of the deal.
Mate, when you said I'm going to share the analogy again, I thought you were going to say the fucking monkey thing again, but I'm glad it was a different analogy.
Mate, we've been thinking about the idea what we're going to write for our book when we write, and I think we're just the monkey climbs the tree or something. The monkey swings up the tree.
I think it's a short chapter, mate.
There's a full book in it.
Mate, the next one we've got here is the legendary Dr. Karl, and I think he's the only one we've doubled up. Yeah? Yeah. So we've done 2 episodes
with Seth, but someone said pushed him back.
Yeah, that was an error. But yeah, so Dr. Karl we did twice. Once about 18 months ago, and then more recently about 6 months ago. Mate, we've aside from all the things we learnt in the convos, and a lot of people have reached out saying he's one of their new favourite people. That mate, firstly, he's a great dishwasher stacker. Loves to maximise the volume of getting the most plates and cups in for one wash. Secondly, mate, he takes a lot of care for his iPad screens.
He does.
Which is something he violated. And then the second time, mate, he really values academic integrity, really looks after exam papers, which is another thing he fucked up as well. Hey, tell us those 2 stories.
0 from 3. Well, the exam paper one, he really stressed. He said, there's exam papers in this room, so make sure the door's closed. Make sure they're fully closed the whole time. And then we did the interview in the exam paper room. Then we strolled into his office. I was the last one.
Just across the hall, man.
Just across the hall,
3 meters away.
Yeah. And then the door opened and he lost his shit.
Mate, there was a guy loitering around just waiting for
an
opportunity.
He was in there for a bit.
Yeah, phenomenal. And I think we really need it now, because I saw you on Twitter posted recently about the Carmichael coal mine in Adani, which is, I think it's going to be 75 million tonnes of coal every year. It's going to be about 1 to 1.5% of the world emissions.
Oh, God.
And that's opening in 2020 with a supposedly 60-year design life of coal. So, and, I've got no idea how, projects like this start coming through when, renewables are the obvious choice in 2020.
Well, the bottom line is global warming is real and it's getting really bad already, and it's just going to get worse. And we have to not go down the same pathway, but in fact reverse, stop putting carbon dioxide and start sucking out of the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And so the Adani coal mine has what's been technically called a royalty holiday. What that means is that they don't have to pay for the royalties on the coal they take out. Mm. Well, I don't want a tax holiday. I like paying tax, but I wouldn't mind a coffee holiday and I wouldn't mind a movie holiday where whenever I get a coffee or a movie, that's free. I wouldn't mind a car holiday where someone gives me a free Tesla, and I wouldn't mind a magazine holiday where people give me free magazines. I wouldn't mind if people give me everything for free, and yet for not only are we giving them a tax holiday on royalties, we're also putting in $1 billion coal mine, $1 billion railway line, and if we put that $1 billion into directly health, education, welfare, or even on protecting the Great Barrier Reef, we'd get more jobs. They're saying in the press releases, I'll get 10,000 jobs. In court, they said 1,000 jobs. And when you compare that, like there's a windmill factory starting up in South Australia. By itself, 600 jobs. Okay, count the number of people who've been booted off the land by the Adani coal mine, and you're getting close, and the jobs that are lost there, you're getting already close to the 1,000 jobs that they'll create. It's the craziest thing that seems to, you've got to take it to the high level, and the high level is that global warming is real, and this can't go ahead because it'll make global warming worse. Yeah. The crookedness along the way, well, that's why you should become a politician.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely
Follow the
ridiculous.
example of Barnaby Joyce. You don't have dual citizenship, do you?
I do.
Oh, you're out, mate.
Yeah, well,
I'm good.
Well, it's the other Adam.
It's on me.
It's the handsome Adam.
Go on, mate.
Oh, it's too funny. I had to leave that handsome Adam gag in the end, just for my own ego and self-esteem.
Yep. It's the only time you'll ever be hearing it, mate.
Mate, there was actually in the Dan Ariely episode also, he said that you were the better Adam.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, Dan's a
and,
much more educated man,
actually,
so Dan knows.
Mate, I said you were the better Adam, and by a bit, and he said only by a bit.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. That's right, Danny. But yeah, so that was a bit about Adani. That was 18 months ago when we spoke about that. So
the Australian election is tomorrow, and it's a very hot topic.
very hot topic. I think it's looks like it might be going ahead with a much reduced scope than what we were speaking about with Dr. Karl. Hopefully no scope.
Mate, Dr. Karl hasn't agreed to this, but we've just decided it's the annual pilgrimage to go see Dr. Karl at November, December each year. So if you've got any questions for Big Bad Dr. Karl, let us know for the next time we speak to him, because he's a bloody legend.
Sooner or later he's going to drop us because of me.
He'll get fed up.
Yeah, enjoy it while we can. Next up we got Cal Newport. He's a bad man, bad boy, but he's good.
Is he?
I don't know why I said that. It just came out. But he's good.
Mate, so he's the author of the book So Good They Can't Ignore You, which was all about, I guess, your approach to work rather than following your passion, getting good first and foremost. And then his next book was Deep Work, which is all about focusing and then how to actually get good. And then his most recent book went, I guess, even more narrow again into digital minimalism. So specifically how we can wean ourselves off this technology addiction and being constantly connected that we've all sort of unintentionally wandered into, and we're sort of trapped.
The books are beautifully linked, like So Good They Can't Ignore You. The focus is on this idea of building career capital, and with career capital, you can actually trade that in for the things that give you like a really enjoyable career. And the best way to build career capital is to actually perform deep work, because high quality work is a function of intensity of focus and time spent. So if you can bump up that intensity of focus, you're going to be giving out higher quality work. And then that kind of links into digital minimalism, as that digital minimalism will always been connected to your phone in some way, kind of detracts from your intensity of focus.
Well, so deep work is my term for the activity where you're focused without distraction on a cognitively demanding task, right? So it's when you're locked in. You're really concentrating hard, you're really thinking hard. So maybe you're trying to produce something really hard, like a piece of writing, or you're trying to learn something really hard that requires intense, unbroken conversation. And my argument is that as our economy in general shifts worldwide, and especially in sort of Western countries towards knowledge work, the ability to do deep work is becoming more and more important. Just like if you lived back in ancient Sparta, your physical fitness would be really important, right? We'd say, yeah, it really matters. Like, you really need to be in good shape because our whole culture is increasingly built around, let's say, physical warfare. Well, right now our culture is increasingly built around doing cognitive work, using your brain to create more value out of information. And deep work is the tier one activity if you want to be good at this. And so what's interesting, the idea came out of, in part, So Good, because people were saying, well, what should I do to get better at things? And basically the answer was get much more comfortable with concentrating, because if you can concentrate intensely, you can pick up new skills really fast. But as I got more into the implications of that reality, what I noticed is that, okay, not only is this becoming more valuable, not just for loving your career, but just in general for succeeding, we're getting worse at it. And this is because of whatever unintentional technological consequences of things like email and Slack and social media and smartphones, that we have a culture right now, a technological culture that partially by design and partially accidentally is radically reducing our ability to concentrate, radically reducing our ability to do deep work. So now we have a classic sort of economic supply and demand type situation where this skill, the ability to concentrate, is becoming more in demand at the same time that its supply is going down. And Economics 101 then says, okay, then the price on this thing is going to be very high. And I think that's what's happening now, that if you're one of the few individuals or organizations who systematically cultivates and protects your ability to concentrate intensely, you get this disproportionate competitive advantage in the marketplace.
That's great stuff, man. And in that interview, we talked about, firstly the surface level of, the importance of it, but we also got towards a conspiracy theory level of, how they've got people on the inside who are trying to hack us. They've worked out what makes us tick, and they've built, Facebook and Twitter. They've built this program specifically to make us addicted, which is evil.
I love how all you conspiracy theorists
all you don't separate yourself.
I'm not part of this group.
Mate,
it's always they, like, they're doing. Who's the fuck? Who's they? Or they're putting
Mate, we need to get-
iodine in the water to make us all dumb and destroy our pineal gland and all this kind of stuff. Jesus.
Mate, for someone who's not in it, mate, you seem to know a hell of a lot about.
Yeah.
Mate. So the next one, the second last one we've got actually is Gretchen Rubin, who was a successful lawyer, and then she left that after a long career. She started doing this bit of a side hustle, I guess, and left to write books. So she did her biggest one that took off, Oprah level took off and got spread everywhere, was called The Happiness Project, which is all about happiness. And then she did a book about habits called Better Than Before, the book that we reviewed called The Four Tendencies, and her most recent one is Outer Order, Inner Calm. The first question I wanted to ask was that your work seems to have really resonated with people. Is happiness something that we all feel like we don't have enough of? Is it something that everyone seems to be striving for more of?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think that for me, and I think for a lot of people, the bigger challenge is just that we forget to think about it. We're just busy with our everyday lives. We're managing our to-do list. And so we don't stop and think like, am I happy? How could I be happier? What's the low-hanging fruit for how I could make my life richer and more fun and easier and with less negative emotion? So I do think that for most people, if they stop and think about it, they do see opportunities where they could have deeper engagement with their family or better relationships with their friends, or they could do more to boost their health and their energy. So I think it's a really good thing to stop and think about, because for most people, there is action that, with things that don't take a lot of time, energy, or money that we can do that will make us happier.
Good stuff from the great Gretchen. We're going to end it with our big papa man, who's a big papa in every sense of the word
he's
papa.
a big papa.
He's our favourite author of our favourite books. Our number one is Laws of Human Nature. Real dream guest. It's not very often you get to, if there was anyone in the whole entire world that I'd love to just sit down and speak to for 1 hour, it'd be Robert Greene. So, that doesn't happen very often. So we did a lot of preparation for this one, and he didn't disappoint. He was full of gold in the interview, and it was, one of the best conversations I've ever had.
Mate, we could talk to him for days, I reckon. He also did the 48 Laws of Power, which we've done on the show previously. He's done a book, Mastery, which we'll probably do in season 4, and also the 33 Strategies of War, The Art of Seduction, The 50th Law, and as you said, mate, our number one book of all time for both of us, The Laws of Human Nature. Mate, they're all epic books. They're massive, encapsulating thousands of years of history and applying it to, power or mastery or human nature. Mate, they're big books, but they're well and truly worth the read. The first snippet we've got here, he talks about empathy, which is, from the Laws of Human Nature. He talks about the law of narcissism and that we're all so self-centered. We all love ourselves, but loving ourselves doesn't help us so much. We need to learn to turn that self-love outwards and start to think more about other people and become more empathic.
Yeah, well, empathy is a big theme in the book. And, a lot of people write books about it and use that word. And I don't find the way that people describe empathy very helpful. Like, I want to know how it could be something that could be used in everyday life. And my idea is that empathy is not necessarily an intellectual process. It's not something necessarily with a bunch of ideas and bullet points that you can put into practice. Empathy is a mix of a feeling, a visceral feeling, an emotion that it can't put into words, and rational analysis. The two must go together. So, when you meet a person for the first time, you have to train yourself to stop your interior monologue and to be very interested, to be outer directed, to put yourself in their position. So that's the first step. And I make the point in the book that you're never going to be able to practice empathy unless you are genuinely interested in other people. So really what makes people self-absorbed is they think that they're more interesting than other people. Their thoughts, their ideas, they're locked in that because it's more interesting than the salesperson at Starbucks or whomever. But I want to make the point that people are actually much more interesting than you think. And you want to try and get into their world. It's like when you go see a movie and there's some interesting character on the screen, you're fascinated by them. I want you to think of the people that you encounter in everyday life as characters in a movie. They are fascinating. They have deep childhood wounds. They have interesting ideas. They have a dark side. They have a shadow. They have strange dreams at night that they never reveal. They wear a mask in front of you, but behind that mask, all sorts of weird things are going on. So you need to be interested in people. And once you're interested in them, you have to use your imagination and sort of see what would it feel like to be them, to get inside of that. And what you want to get is just a sense of the emotions, the mood, the feeling, the tone that people give off, not just the words that they say.
So, mate, that's some really deep stuff. And he really slaps you up in the book, which is his whole intention, which we'll speak about in a second. But this is where he really slapped me up, is just the understanding that I am a deep narcissist, and so are most people. And the only way to move past that is to fully, first of all, acknowledge that you're a narcissist. I mean, for all of us, like, say if 1,000 people died on the other side of the world, compared to your boss sends you a weird email and makes you feel uncomfortable, you're going to be thinking about your boss's email for the next 48 hours. You're not going to be thinking about the 2,000 people who died of hunger on the other side of the world. So we need to apply this in everyday life. When we sit down and speak to people, there really is no upside if you're just in your own head. There's a massive upside if you can get out of your own head and get into the other person and understand what their emotions are and what they're going through. And it's kind of counterintuitive. If the goal is to attract attention, your usual approach is to focus on yourselves and talk about yourself. But a better approach is actually to focus on them, using empathy, and then paradoxically, you're going to be receiving the attention. So the next banger we're going to finish it off on is how he speaks about the openness and willingness to change for everybody. How confident are you in people's willingness to change, especially as we get older?
Well, it gets harder to want to change as we get older. A lot of people read self-help books. It's a huge genre. I'm actually, obviously categorized in that. So that means that people are searching for something that will help them change their lives. But a lot of the time, people are looking for kind of shortcuts. They want to just sort of hear something. They want easy answers for a change. And so that reveals the fact that people have a desire, but the desire isn't really strong enough to lead to anything lasting. Sometimes you have to get in a position of desperation. You have to be so frustrated with a problem or so frustrated with yourself that you're willing to try something. But, I do a lot of consulting work with powerful people, CEOs, people in politics, etc. And I'm always amazed that they come to me with a desire for change, but really they just want to hear ideas that are already in their mind. They don't want to hear things that were going to require effort. They don't want to hear things that mean they have to alter how they do things. They don't want to hear things that go contrary to their own opinions about, they think that they basically have good ideas and strategies, and they want me to confirm that. So most people desire change, but they're not serious enough. They're not yet at that point of desperation, And so also as we get older, we get the feeling that we know better than others, that we have the right idea. We get more rigid, so we lose that ability to want to be open to other people's ideas. So I don't know what the percentage of it is, but I know in my books, I really, really, really want to make an effort to hit you over the head and make you really want to change yourself. So you read The Laws of Human Nature, and I'm kind of brutally honest with you. I'm revealing all of these things about yourself that you can't escape. I repeat over and over again. You think other people are narcissists? No, you're a narcissist. You think other people are aggressive? No, you're aggressive. I'm not going to let you wiggle free. I'm going to show you who you are, and I hope in doing that, I can spark the desire to change. Because if you don't understand who you are and your own flaws and your own weaknesses, how are you going to be able to change? And so the problem with a lot of self-help books is they flatter the reader And I don't like flattering the reader. I want to show the reader, the real truth. I want to hold a mirror up to you. Because if you don't understand who you are, how are you going to be able to change yourself?
Bang.
Bang, yeah. And he does hit you over the head.
Yeah, he does, mate. I think it's super important. I think it was the perfect way to end there, and that we all do need to change in some way. We've touched on it throughout this episode that we do need to change, and the first step is firstly being aware of where you are currently. And as you said, some books are nice and fluffy and tell you what you want to hear, but some books really show you, no, this is truly where you are, and if you want to change, this is how you need to do it. So I think it's something we all need to be open to, man. Open to changing.
Absolutely. There's only upside too.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to say tinkering. Probably were, yeah.
There's only upside to change. If you keep on tinkering, clawing up the vines of life to the top of the apple tree.
That's it, mate.
There's only apples. Most of all, thank you everybody for listening to the show, and it really means a lot. We don't get paid for this. I mean, we got a book depository link.
Yeah.
We get about
We've probably got 3 books out of it.
Yeah, 3 books. So we got basically nothing out of the book depository link. So the only reason we do it is to actually really, hopefully, help other people in some way. We're obviously doing it to some extent to help ourselves, but the real fuel that keeps us going is understanding that we're really making a difference to someone. If not us directly, they might hear from us, which sparks them to buy the book, and then that has a big impact on them. So that's the thing that really gets us going and up and about.
Yeah, definitely. We certainly appreciate everybody listening. As I sort of said at the start, we started the podcast as a test, and there was all these benefits of reading and communication skills and confidence, and the 6th or 7th benefit would be that maybe someone listens one day. And I think we started with 2 or 3 listeners, and it gradually built up from there. And our next goal after that was maybe get one person to read one book that would change their life somehow. And we're thankful that there are all these people around the world listening to this. We hear from people occasionally of episodes that have connected with them or books that they've checked out as a result. So a big thank you for listening so far. We've done 200 episodes now, and we're looking forward to the next 200.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite recently, a lot of the reviews we've been getting on iTunes have been a little bit more, I'd say, emotionally charged in a very positive way for us, which has meant a real great deal. So if you want to show your appreciation for the show, that's one of the things that we'd love for you to do, is just leave a review. Gives us a bit of that social proof, but at the same time just really does make us feel good and gives us a lot of fuel to keep on moving.
Yeah, it definitely does. As you say, mate, we're taking more and more time, and seeing how, a couple of sentences here of someone who's enjoyed the show or someone who's made a change is just gives us that next little bit of juice for the next couple of episodes to keep going.